Today's guest, John McDonagh, has spent the last 40 years driving New York City crazy in his yellow taxi cab. John was born in the US, but he spent much of his childhood in Lettercran in County Donegal. After serving in the US Army in Germany during the Vietnam War, John began his career as a New York City taxi driver. He has been engaged in political activism for many years, including organising the Cabbies Against Bush campaign in 2004 and fundraising for Irish Northern Aid, a support group who raised money for families of IRA prisoners in the late 80s and 90s. When he's not being an activist, John is writing and performing his one-man show titled Off the Meter, On the Record, a comedy play which he describes his life experiences as an Irish cabbie in New York City. He has also presented a show on Radio Free Éireann with the late Malachy McCourt, brother of Frank McCourt. You may recognise John from his recent viral fame on the online shows Subway Takes and Keep the Meter Running, or indeed as Johnny Two Pints, the man who cashed in on his IOU pints 10 years after a customer of his couldn't afford his taxi bill. But more on that later. Well, thank you so much for joining me on How to Be Irish. I really want to pick apart everything that it means about being Irish for you and your whole journey, your life coming to New York, working in New York, and all of your involvement around all things Irish.
It really starts, you could say, on the border of Donegal, Fermanagh, and Tyrone, where they all come together. A lot of people would know the area if they were anyway religious going to Lough, because that was the main employer during, say, June, July, and August. My mother and her sisters worked on the island, and you do a 3-day pilgrimage, or now they have the 1-day sort of for wimps that go out, see the place for 1 day, and then come back. So that's the area. And the immigration is the history of Ireland. In the 30s, because my parents are from the north, the main immigration route was to Scotland. Like if you know anything about Donegal or West Tyrone, you would go up to Derry, take a cattle boat to Glasgow. So my father and his brother went to Glasgow to a place called the Gorbals, which is not like today. It's gentrified, but a horrible place for the Irish. They found it very rough. My uncle got tuberculosis. They came back. And then my uncle got a visa to immigrate to New Zealand. He went down to New Zealand. My father stayed in Tyrone throughout the duration of the war. So my uncle ends up in the New Zealand Army, a prisoner of war in North Africa, wounded in Italy, and then came back to Ireland. And he said he's never leaving Ireland again. A World War II broke out the last time he left. So then my father gets the visa. He was going to go to New Zealand for New York. So in 1948, this is when the term "you're off the boat" came in. My father was off the boat, came to New York, set up a job and everything like that, went back, married my mother in Donegal in the early 50s, came back to New York. She had 3 of us, and then we went back to Donegal, where I went to school, worked on my uncle's sheep farm. And then when I was about 8 or 9, we came back to New York again, 3 more kids. So my mother raised 6 of us in Queens, New York, which was no easy feat. So that's it. So I've been going back and forth because my mother always sent me back to my uncle's sheep farm in Donegal to work. So I have clipped sheep, dipped sheep, dosed sheep, sold sheep, anything you want to do. Not very well. And I went to the bog and footed turf and brought it in. And all of that stuff would be very unusual to say, oh, as a New Yorker, this is what I've done. But, it was great. We didn't like it in the beginning, but then we got to love it. And then, I got my Irish citizenship, Irish passport. My kids went to school in Galway for college. So there's always been a direct connection. It's not some distant, far off past.
Yeah. And I suppose sometimes in Ireland, there's a bit of like a negative connotation around the term like Irish American. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, did they call Shane McGowan? Was he Irish English or whatever, when he moved back to Tipperary? Or I even go back, say, to James Connolly, who came from Scotland, fought in 1916. I think there's a different variation because of the history of people leaving. They might have left the island, but they brought everything with them, their music, their culture. And that's what we grew up with, and we would go back and forth. I mean, you almost have this silly idea you have to be born in Ballymun, deal dope, and do 3 months in Mountjoy, and then you're considered Irish, which is like ridiculous. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe it comes from the idea of some people who've got some very ancient Irish ancestry, and they're like, oh, I'm Irish, or even when Barack Obama, everyone was so excited that he was Irish. They had
Kamala Harris has some Irish background father, so forget it. They're going to go back hundreds of years, but I don't need to go back that far. Although that's coming to an end. There's not as much immigration here to New York. I know going back and forth, back before COVID, there was a ton of Australian parties that were happening all around the Toronto Donegal area, where people were heading down to Australia. And, I think it's very sad that the Irish or the Free State government educates their youth and then ships them off with that valuable education to work in Australia, New Zealand, where they didn't have to pay for any of that. So they get the finished product when they come down to those countries. So,
yeah,
but, that's the history.
Yeah, we are a group of people maybe a little bit obsessed with immigration. I myself being in Spain currently. Do you have any thoughts on like why that might be? Do you think it's like in our blood?
No, it's not in your blood, it's in your history. I mean, you wouldn't be doing this if there was great jobs and great opportunities. Nobody's leaving Ireland who has a 150,000 euro job, a fantastic house, and a car. That's not who's immigrating. The person who's immigrating might have that same education as that person, but can't get the job. So he's leaving now. You hear about these Irish bars in Dubai and the Middle East and stuff like that. That they're getting work there. So no, it's not it's in the history, and they've never been able to keep the youthful population because they can't get them the jobs. I mean, all I hear about in Dublin, I can't work in Dublin because I can't afford to live there. Mm-hmm. So, it's just, it's a sad reality. Like, you don't have that here in New York. You have immigrants coming to New York. You don't have like New Yorkers like immigrating somewhere. There's no New York diaspora somewhere. So it's work. True. And then that's what it is.
Yeah. So you started working as a taxi driver in New York about 40 years ago.
The career path for a son of Irish immigrants in New York, I don't know what it's like in Boston, but I'd say it's similar. Is you graduate high school, you do your time in the service, and when you get out, you take the test for the sanitation, the fire department, and the NYPD. Like in my house, college was never discussed. My mother and father left school in 6th grade. So they didn't have even the concept of what college was like, but they knew union. You get to New York, Irish union. You had Mike Quill from Kerry, IRA anti-treaty volunteer who came to New York, set up the transport workers, hired nothing but Irish. And it was a good union job. So as soon as you land in New York, you were told, get a union job. So now when I did my time in the Army, I was stationed in Germany for a year and a half. I got back to New York. The city of New York was bankrupt. And there's a famous headline that says, Ford to city dropped dead. And that was the President Ford wouldn't give New York any money. So the city of New York was laying off cops, firemen, and sanitation. So the normal path for me was closed off. So I went and got my hack license thinking I would only drive a short time. But life takes over, and 40 years later, this is what you got left. Travis Bickle, if he was still driving.
And how have you found that experience? Are you like, this is the, it's probably fueled a lot of your writing, your creative work. You've been able to write a play about your experiences. Are you like grateful that you found that path and what it's given?
No, I'm neither grateful or ungrateful. It's just life. That happened. And I've managed to take advantage of that part of my life. And the only reason that it's working is because of the internet. It's because of Facebook. It's because of the internet, TikTok and Instagram. Because otherwise, had I written a play and all these other platforms to get the word out about it, it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't get the sellout crowds that I get. And now it's just blown up completely because I've hooked up with 2 influencers in New York who are using me in their platforms. of TikTok and Instagram that it's been it's an unbelievable ride that I'm on right now. Like, how did you discover me?
I found you on TikTok. I was just scrolling through and I saw the Keep the Meter Running episode, or at least a clip of that. And yeah, I just was like, I love this. It's interesting. It's kind of maybe a little bit absurd, quirky.
Yeah.
And I suppose same then when you came up with Subway Takes. Well, I started following you on Instagram. You've obviously had this play running for a while, been able to like take a lot of content from it and put it across other platforms. And when do you have any more shows coming up? I think you had one last year in Dublin.
Yeah, I was at in Dublin at the East Wall. It was the Sean O'Casey Theatre. I was at the Cork Arts Theatre down in Cork. And then I did the Abbey Theatre in Ballyshannon and Donegal. So I always say, oh yeah, I've done the Abbey. It's the Abbey Arts Centre in Ballyshannon. And that was the best show ever because it sat 300 and all my relations from Tyrone, from out of, and I had first cousins fly in from England for it. So it was a great reunion and everyone coming up to me. I never realized you did all that stuff because I never talked about it. I go back a couple of pints with everyone and that's it. Because then they say, he's bragging, it was this and that. But when it's the play, it's different for whatever reason. If I sat down at the bar and said, yeah, I was hanging out with Stephen Fry and Richard Hammond, and there's another blowhard yank coming in, telling us about it. But if you do it in the play, they go, oh my God, he's a playwright. Oh, another status.
Yeah, exactly. Can you tell us a little bit about the fundraising that you did in the 80s and 90s? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'll start off by saying RTE came over about 6 months ago. And I'll never forget, the producer called me up and he said, well, we want to do the history of Irish Northern Aid or the Irish Republicanism in New York. So I said to him, I said, really? I said, throughout the recent history, you had Section 31 brought in by Conor Cruz O'Brien, which banned Sinn Féin, which banned any mention of Irish Republicanism. And now you're taking an interest. Well, I guess goes to the peace process. So the guy I was talking to goes, listen, I'm 35 years old. I never heard of Irish Northern Aid. I don't know what you guys were doing over there. So then it dawned on me, we're just historical, bringing back what happened. But to give it in its context, we've been involved with the history of Ireland and the Republican movement since the 1800s. Michael Davitt, the Landleague, the Fenian movement. The Dynamite Campaign. Then in the 1900s, we were involved with the uprising with almost all the leaders, the signers of proclamation. They all came into New York, and Eamon de Valera was staying at the Waldorf Astoria fundraising. Oh, that was all right. He was fundraising. So as time goes on, so now you have the Troubles break out. And I'll never forget the RTE guy said to me, he goes, well, why did you get involved? I said, you know what you would be asking me? With everything that's going on, where all my relations live, and I didn't get involved, you'd be saying, well, you have a long history. Why aren't you involved? And so Irish Northern Aid was a support group for prisoners' families. And what they did was send money over so the prisoners in the North or the South could get to Portlaoise Prison or Long Kesh for visits. So to relieve that financial burden that they had. So that's what we got involved with. And
what kind of fundraising activities would you have done?
First of all, it had to be above board and legal because the FBI were on top of us like you would not believe with informants. Like when I was living in the Bronx, they were handing out green cards to illegal Irish stating that if you go to certain fundraisers and report back to us, we'll make your family legal. So there was a lot of that. And MI5, British intelligence, were running agents over here in New York to keep on top of what was going on. So they took us as a serious threat because you have to remember, RTE and the BBC treated us two different ways. The first way they treated us, these Irish Americans, the green hat, the green beer, St. Patrick's Day, they couldn't find Ireland on a map. They're so naive. They're giving their money in buckets and stuff like that. And then the flip side, these Irish Americans, if they weren't doing what they're doing, the Troubles would be over now. They're the ones that financing it. They're the ones keeping the troubles going for what they're doing in New York, which is ridiculous. We were just part of a long historical pattern of helping out the Republican movement in Ireland via New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco.
Was there any crazy stories or anything like that with the FBI?
Yeah, well, I just did a podcast with this about the life and times of David Rupert, who was an FBI informant, and at least 3 times he tried to set me up to use money to buy guns. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was wired by the FBI. So I had a couple of meetings with him, and he's in a 12-part series, David Rupert, the Irish Rebel, or something like that. I forget what it was, but a very interesting podcast to find out how the FBI use informants to infiltrate legal organizations and then flip them to be illegal. Like they've done this with the Muslim community here in New York. They'll go to Muslim meetings and play on the emotion of someone and say, listen, you're not doing enough here. We got to up the ante. We need to bomb this or do this. And these people that didn't have it in their head, now they have it in their head. So they don't even have the money to do it, the car. The FBI provides everything for you. And then you start going to do what they recommended, then you're arrested. It said, FBI arrest terrorists going to blow up a synagogue or something like that. So, I mean, from an Irish-American point of view, the FBI have been notorious within the Irish-American community, or the Irish Republican community, I should say.
And why are they interested in
It's our ally. Britain put the pressure on the FBI, and it came out in this podcast, telling them, you better stay on top of what's going on, particularly in New York, Chicago, and Boston. We're your allies. We give you, information and intelligence on other different things. We want you to now start feeding us the intelligence on what's going on in New York. So that's how it all came about. Peace process came into play, and Irish Northern Aid dissolved, and Clan of Gael really dissolved, and other support. And that's it. Now, the past 25, 30 years, the Irish peace process has played out.
I was 2 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, so like my whole idea of Northern Ireland and the Troubles is something that is in a history book that I learned for like junior and leaving cert history, but it doesn't.
But you know what? Well, I found when people came to New York, because I did the radio show and I would have Sinn Féin on. And Sinn Féin was banned on the BBC and RT, and I had people come up to me in New York saying, I never heard that point of view before. I had to come all the way to New York. And also, I would ask, particularly a lot of people from Dublin, that would come out, and they think they knew it all. You can always tell a Dublin man, but you can't tell him very much, that type of thing. And I said, oh, you've done a lot of traveling. Have you ever been to Belfast? No. Have you ever been to Derry? No, but I've been to Paris. I've been to Germany. I've been to Australia. I said, you're only 60 miles up the road. But because all my family lived literally on the border, Pettigo is the village my mother's from. Half of it's in Fermanagh and half's in Donegal. Now, during the Troubles, there was 30 Garda stationed in Pettigo. Then you had the customs men that were stationed in Pettigo. And then you had from Finner Camp in Donegal, the Irish Army was stationed all around. That's on one side of Pettigo. On the other side, you had the RUC, the Ulster Defence Regiment, and the British Army. You couldn't get more militarized than this sleepy little village of Pettigo. But it was in the forefront of smuggling, of people going back and forth. And as a matter of fact, the Loyalists bombed Pettigo twice during the Troubles, almost killed one of my uncles driving through. So, I mean, it was a lived experience, but people in the South, they didn't want to know anything about the North. Many times they thought Donegal was part of the North. Geographically it is, but not politically. I mean, and that's why Donegal has suffered so much from the Troubles and lack of investment from the South that, they were literally, it's called the Forgotten County, and it was cut off from everything. So
absolutely. I mean,
that's my ad for dear old Donegal.
I know. Poor old Donegal doesn't even have a train to it,
or a highway.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? I was shocked. I went through Limerick just a couple of months ago down to Cork, Galway. I couldn't believe the roadways. And then when I talked to cabbies in Dublin, They said they were doing one-day trips, the buses, to Galway, shopping there, Cliffs of Moher, come back, all within one day. There was a time, it was a 2-day adventure to get from Dublin to Galway, through every town, every sheep mart that was going on. And those highways have benefited the west of Ireland, that part of the west of Ireland, but not Donegal, because the infrastructure was never put in there. And as a matter of fact, when the border was drawn up in 1921, right away, they shut down the railways, started shutting down and everything. And the roads were blown up all around the border to funnel you into one road that you would be held up for, stop and search in your car, open the boot and bonnet, familiar term that you would hear. And you would just be telling everyone, mind your tongue, do not say anything, because we'll be stuck here for hours if you give any lip to whichever side of the border you on. You just went through the routine, and it became routine. You thought it would never end. And nobody thought that would ever end.
And did you experience a lot of this when you were in Donegal looking after those sheep?
You couldn't avoid it. If you're on the border like that, going back and forth, but it was natural. It wasn't, you didn't think it was out of place. This just was the way it was. And that was it. So it had a huge effect on me. But the main thing that had an effect, and this is what got me started on my road to Irish Republicanism. I was over at my uncle's farm, 1981, the summer. And that was the year of the Irish hunger strike in Longkesh. So by the time I got over there, 4 hunger strikers had died already. So a couple of them had died, Joe McDonagh, Martin Herson. I went to their wakes and funeral. So when I went to the wake of Joe McDonald's funeral, marching with the casket down Falls Road, the British Army attacked the cortege. The coffin was dropped. Everyone was rioting, throwing rocks and stuff. And they wouldn't even allow you to bury your dead. So then the funeral cortege brings it to Milltown Cemetery, and they had a helicopter flying over. You couldn't hear the speeches that were given at the gravesite. They drowned out everyone. So that put a bitterness into everybody that, there's famous plays written about World War I, about the Christmas soccer game between the Germans and the English, and then even how they were allowed to bury their dead. You didn't have that in the North. The British government would not allow you to bury your dead. So that stuck into me. So when I came back to New York, I was at the demonstration supporting the hunger strike. A radio station was down there, was left wing. They heard my story, and they said, because it was a worldwide topic, can you do a show about it, get people on? I said, yes. So I started in 1981. I've been going ever since.
Wow. So that's how you started radio, your show on Radio Free Erin.
Radio Free Erin. Yeah.
Radio Free Erin. Brilliant. And what kind of stuff do you talk about today? Like, how do you make it relevant in 2024?
Well, I don't talk so much about the politics anymore, because to me, that's all over. It's internal fighting. It's storming up. It's storming down. Who's getting the seat? Sinn Féin's winning. The Loyalists are winning. I mean, the sectarianism in the 6 counties has not changed one iota. I'll never forget my aunt in Fermanagh, when Bobby Sands got elected to Parliament. And I said, who did you vote for? She hated the IRA. Detested, you got to remember, they were not popular. And she says, well, I couldn't vote for that other crowd, could I? So she would rather vote for the IRA than vote for a Protestant. And that's to this day. If you go up north, like people tell me, where were you, in that restaurant? Oh, that's the Orangemen go there. We go to the Catholic one. Like, I got cousins living in Castledurg. Castledurg and County Tyrone is almost split in half. Catholics go to one end of Castledurg, the Protestants are at the other. And the housing estates, my cousins live in a Catholic housing estate, and then there's a Protestant housing estate, and never the two meet. So that has not changed. But to say, since the process has changed, I have went more into the arts, because what has happened is the Irish Repertory Theatre, after a phone call from Malachy McCourt, saw what I was doing, storytelling about cab driving. So Kieran O'Reilly, the founder of the Irish Rep, took it and made it an off-Broadway play. I did 3 months there, sold out, brilliant reviews. and I haven't stopped doing it since. So now I cover the arts at the Irish Repertory Theater, or what's going on in New York. And now I've started my own event at the QED Comedy Club in Queens of storytelling of New Yorkers. So I've got that going. So I branched out into entertainment and arts from politics. And I have to say, it's a lot easier.
How do you find the arts then as a medium to put out your message? If it's the same, do you think it's the same message, or are you more observing?
No, I put out because it's history now. If it's ongoing and people are dying, that's where the problems would come in. Because I got so many death threats at the radio station: baby killer, you're killing this and you're killing that, and you know, civilians. So that is a lot harder to put out art about what was going on at the time. But as you get distance, you can do the art about what happened, and people look at it differently. But doing something art-wise about the Troubles during the Troubles, that was not easy. And it really took years and years after the Good Friday Agreement for a lot of the art to get developed, you know? I mean, listen, you got this band out of Belfast, Kneecap, right? Rapping in Irish with balaclavas on. You know what? They wouldn't have got out of their area. The loyalists would have been setting them up to be assassinated. And, you know, it's a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. I mean, Sinn Féin have the most seats in the north.
And almost on both sides of the border. I mean, they are the large. See, the one good thing about Sinn Féin, they are a 32 county party. Whereas Fianna Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Green Party is, but they're still separate. But it really is. Sinn Féin has always been a 32 county government, and the way they've been treated, like they've had actual councillors executed by loyalists. Like there was a Donegal councillor that was executed, Eddie Fullerton. The 26 county government never really looked into it. Loyalists came across the border, executed him in his house. And you know, but that's all with you. Being a Sinn Féin councillor back during the Troubles could have been a death sentence.
Yeah.
But absolutely. North and south of the border.
Yeah. Do you think that Ireland will be united in the next?
Not in my lifetime, and not in your lifetime, because you know why? The language has changed. When I was involved with the Republican movement, everything was for a united Ireland. Now I listen to, as they call it, London Mary Lou McDonald. We're looking for an agreed Ireland, a shared Ireland. So United Ireland is not even on the cards anymore. I don't care what they say. They talk a good game, Sinn Féin, when they come to New York, because I'll never forget Joe Cahill, big money man for the IRA. We're going to have a United Ireland by 1995. Martin McGuinness comes over. 10 years we're going to have it. He died. Jerry Adams comes over. 10 years. Mary Lou was just over here. In our lifetime, we're going to have it. I mean, it's all BS. A United Ireland is not on the cards. It's going to be some bastardized version of a shared Ireland or a United Ireland. Not United Ireland, but an agreed Ireland, whatever that means. And nobody seems to know what that means. But it's nice words. And there's this illusion in the future. And you know what kills you? And the Free State government, I still call them that because they're still Free State bastards to me. What they did during the Troubles and allowed a lot of that stuff to go on. They come out with a survey every once in a while. Do you know how much a United Ireland would cost us with pensions and this and that? And I'm there for 30 freaking years. You didn't say anything about the cost of soldiers, of guards, of customs men, of maintaining the border. The price could have been unlimited, and it was unlimited. We will do anything to maintain that border. And the British government said the same thing. So they never talked about the cost of maintaining a border. Now that the border's going away, they go, whoa, how much is that going to cost us? Well, let's look what it cost during the Troubles. How much did that cost for you to keep the border? So, you know, they're playing silly games, but it's not going to happen. We don't have to worry about it. You will not be doing a Zoom meeting about a United Ireland anytime soon.
I think it's interesting for like my age group from the South, you know, particularly I'm from Limerick. So like I'm very South, and, you know, I've grown up post Good Friday Agreement, geographically far away from the north. I've been to the north a few times, but I haven't spent extended amounts of periods of time there. And it's very easy for us to say like, oh yeah, United Ireland. But I don't think we understand what's like behind that, and how much those words meant, years ago. I do find it interesting that what you said there about the government talking about the cost if the North was to rejoin. Because again, it just kind of reminded me of, what's going on in Ireland at the moment around like immigration and protests, where, there's the idea of these are huge costs if we need to like, house asylum seekers, etc. But there's also huge costs associated with getting the Gardaí out to put up fences and get rid of the protests and, all this kind of stuff, like build different, rebuild these buildings that people have set on fire. It feels like kind of the same idea where it's like, you don't want to talk about one, like there's always going to be a cost. But it's like, what do the people really want? That's the thing that we should be focusing on.
Well, listen, you can't even sing songs in the South. Your very own Limerick, the hurling or the football team wants to sing Sean South to Gary Owen, and everybody's clutching their pearls. Oh, we can't be singing that song about Sean South from Limerick, or I forget, it was the women's football team. Ooh, Up the Raw by the Wolf Tones. Oh, the world was coming to an end, and everybody couldn't get to RTE fast enough to apologize to sing a song. And what kills me, like particularly Sean South to Gary Owen, right? Because my former co-host on radio, Malachi McCord, was friends with Sean South. Gary, he went to school with him, and he told me the funeral in Limerick at that time for Sean South was like unbelievable, because it's not that far after the Civil War was going on. So those songs are never played on RTE. Like I'm over twice a year. I put on RTE. I'll hear more about Lady Gaga than I will Sean South. Let me tell you. So, but everyone knows the songs because they go to the pubs and it's almost looking around. All right, now we can sing those songs. Nobody's listening. So here's the team. I forget, was it the hurling team or the football team in Limerick? They started singing Sean South to Gary Owen. Oh my God, the apologies. Everybody's tripping over each other. Sorry for glorifying terrorism and everything. So, it still hasn't been dealt with, the troubles.
Yeah. Will it ever be dealt with though? Like how is that meant to play out? It's going to take a very long time. And I think, as people are getting older and people are dying, and we're losing that tradition of our storytelling, it's kind of been forgotten,
Oh, it is. And it has, I had a cousin of mine, Packy John McGoldrick in Pettigo, a famous storyteller in the area. And before he died there at his house in Pettigo, and I said, Packy, do you go out to the pubs anymore? Because everyone used to love seeing him coming in. You knew there was going to be a session of singing. He goes, no, I don't go out. Because you go in there, no one would look at me. They're all on their phone. And if not, there's 20 TVs on for different English Premier Leagues. And he says, they don't want to hear my stories anymore. He says, it's over. And I just said, oh, God, that is so sad. That whole, like, I grew up with that. And I couldn't wait to go out to little local pubs and hear a local song that you would never hear on RTE or something like that. Or somebody particularly somebody doing a recitation, the cremation of Sam McGee, or, a bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malahoot Saloon. Like, do you hear that anyway? Oh my God, you'd be run out of the pub. But the bartender used to tell everyone at the bar, shh, everyone, quiet. Packy John's going to give us a recitation. Yeah, and everybody be quiet. And thank God I recorded a lot of that stuff. So I use it on the radio show too, of his recitations and singing songs. And but that, it's changing. Listen, the Green Party, I can't even burn turf up in Donegal anymore. You know what burning turf is like? I have to go out. It's like buying weed in Donegal. Hey, do you have a bag of turf? How much? It's €5. All right, meet me in the back. Get the bag of turf, bring it back, and start burning it. I mean, they're just, all the traditions are going to what? No, What will be the new traditions coming out of it? Staring at my phone and watching Chelsea or frickin' Liverpool play.
I know. I suppose that there's always a big question around tradition, like how much of the ownership should be on the people, on the government? Should tradition needs to develop? Should it develop? How much do we protect it? What kind of traditions do you feel like you try to promote or live, in your everyday life?
Well, I
Irishness.
almost every day. Like I'm calling up people because I run this event in Queens of storytelling. And in New York City, there's storytelling events. I'm going to one tonight in Brooklyn and Bushwick, where I'm going to tell the story about how I'm in a video that got 4 million views, which is just mind-boggling. So the thing I run in Queens once a month, the second Thursday at the QED Comedy Club. Last week, a couple of weeks ago, I had one of the people that runs the Sean O'Casey Theater. He was in town, and he talked about the connection between New York and Ireland. I have people from the Irish Repertory Theater who are doing plays come and do parts of their play, Irish plays. So I'm keeping it in my own little way going in Queens, and it sells out all the time because people really do want to hear it. And
there's a huge appetite.
Storytelling,
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the group called Shanakiha. They like.
I just did Shanachie last month.
There you go. So
Tennessee.
That's amazing that's been, it's so popular with like young people in Ireland, and it's going all over the world. It's going to Australia. I mean, it was in New York. Like, it's great to see it. And like, I think people really love it because it's so simple. It's like, again, you're no phones, no screens. You're just listening to a story.
Yes. They just had it at the Dead Rabbit downtown by Wall Street.
Yes. That's owned by Belfast people.
Yes, that you are correct there. Yes, that's right. It was all young people. Like, so it was great. Yeah. So it's out there, but now it takes a lot of effort where it happened organically when you walked into a pub before. Now it's an event, which that in itself is sad that you have to create an event for story. But listen, if that's what keeps it alive, that's the way we got to go. That's the road we're going down. Because what I do is I record all the stories and then I put them up online on all my platforms to say, listen, this is what you're missing. Come out and support us here in Queens. So I'm using the new technology, not video, but TikTok, Instagram, freaking everything else out there. Facebook. Facebook is like an obituary page. Sam announced today so-and-so died. That's all I have.
RIP.ie.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's all you see on Facebook. But
this is it. I suppose you're right in saying it has to become an event, but at least there's still that appetite there. Perhaps, maybe our lives are just so organized because of how much is going on that they need to be events so that people, you can't just walk into the pub and like expect that you're going to have a storytelling night. It has to be organized now.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story of Johnny 2 Pints and how that came about?
Well, they go to Fox Television and just type in my name and 2 Pints, you'll see it. But about now, the years are going by. It's 10 to 15 years ago. It's 4 a.m. A guy gets in. I hear the Irish accent. So we get to the destination. He doesn't have enough money. There was no credit cards at the time. So he said he owns a bar in Dublin. And that's to now I know, Gaffney and Son. And he says, if you ever come to Ireland, and he wrote it down a receipt on an official New York City document because the cabs at that time had something called a trip sheet. So he wrote, give this yank 2 pints. I owe him, blah, blah, blah. So I never took him up in the order because like a lot of us whose parents come from the west of Ireland, either you go to Shannon or when you land in Dublin, you go right north. You don't stay in Dublin because as a New Yorker, for me to stay in Dublin, I didn't leave New York. There's freaking traffic, there's crime, drugs. Like I'm there. Where did I go? I went to the Conley Street station. It was like Night of the Living Dead going up Talbot Street to O'Connell Street. I said, well, what the frick is this? I left New York for this. So when I land in Dublin, I drive straight up to Donegal or Fermanagh or whatever, right? So now I'm doing the play. and I'm doing it at the Sean O'Casey Theater. So I got a lot of friends in Dublin because of the arts. And I said, listen, I'm coming over. I want to get these 2 pints of Guinness. So I said, feed it to the media because they had contacts. And sure enough, I think it was the Daily Mail did a full page of me holding up 2 pints of Guinness at the cab. And then that was it. I land in Dublin, BBC, RTE, all the newspapers, all Lampanelli or some Italian one. I didn't know she was from Dublin. I did her radio show and all these radio shows. And then I get the email every American wish he got when he lands in Dublin. And the headline is Guinness. And they said, if you're available, can you come for a private tour at the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin? I said, if I'm available, are you kidding me? This is like getting an email from the Pope saying, can you come to the Vatican? So they send a car for me. They bring me there, private tour of Guinness. And I was the talk of the town. Cab drivers had a WhatsApp group that they were following all the madness I was doing. So sold out 3 shows. Sean O'Casey Theater is 150 seats. So 400 or 500 seats, that's not the easiest thing in the world for a guy that nobody knew until then. So then when I get back to New York that Monday, Fox Television contacted me and said, we've been following what you're doing in Ireland. We want to do a segment on you. But it was local Fox for New York. So I go out with the cab, drive around, tell them the story, and they did a great job. All the affiliates of Fox picked up on the story because it was non-political, feel-good story, crazy cabbie going to get 2 free pints of Guinness. And I say, this is why I drive a cab and I'm not a businessman. Most people walk to the bar or get a cab to the bar. I just spent $700 for an Aer Lingus ticket. So those 2 free pints cost me $350 each for 2 free pints. So I tell that whole story. And then the following day, Piers Morgan is on Fox talking about it. And it went viral in Australia and New Zealand. So it was unbelievable. But it was a feel-good story and it was fun and that. So I'm coming back over now in October. And David Gilner, who's a playwright, he produces short films. He's going to do a short film on what happened to me on that notorious week of Johnny 2 Pints, where I took Dublin by storm.
Brilliant. I'm just so surprised that you remembered it in a way. Did you still have that IOU slip that
your
I man wrote out?
In the play, I hold it up. And
Wow.
in the background, it circled around. You could see it's not my handwriting and that. Most people didn't believe it. They thought I had set it up. But then they contacted the Sun, who verified the story. And then at Gaffney and Son, they put a huge banner out, welcome to Dublin or welcome to Gaffney and Son. It was, I'll tell you, I was on cloud 9 in Dublin. And here's the weird thing. I couldn't drink because you could do 2 things. You can either drink and not do the play, or you do the play and not drink. You can't do both. So even when I was at the Guinness Storehouse, they were offering me all sorts of Guinness. I said, listen, I got to do a play tonight. I can't be doing this stuff. So,
damn it. That's so unfortunate.
Oh, the irony of it all.
Yeah. I mean, a great publicity though for the show. So you'll have to figure out a way to get back to that pub again. It's in Fairview, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's in Fairview. It's near Crow Park, and they're famous for people going there. I'm sure they had a gigantic, he told me they hire 15 bartenders for the All-Ireland final just to pour Guinness. And then they have 5 people they can't get it up on that. So they treated me very good. So I'm going back now in October to film me coming back and that nobody recognizes me. I am yesterday's Guinness. Flat.
Yesterday's Guinness, yeah.
Flat with no head, and that's it.
Here, before we wrap up, I have a few quick questions for you. So first of all, where can you get the best pint of Guinness in New York?
You know what? A lot of places have it now. It's been perfected. I mean, there was a time where there was very few bars that had it running. I would never just pick up. I mean, all right, one of my favorites, it's owned by a Dublin guy, the Wolfhound in Astoria, Queens. They pour a very good pint. But I'm always very skeptical. When I go into a bar, I look to see what everybody else is drinking. If nobody's drinking Guinness and if that pint hasn't been pulled, I'll drink Blue Moon or something like that. But otherwise, everybody's, because if you don't have a good pint of Guinness, people can go to another bar and get a good pint of Guinness. I mean, another place that's famous for is Paddy Riley's, owned by a Donegal guy on 2nd Avenue, 29th Street and 2nd. They're known for Guinness because when they first opened up, that's all they served was Guinness. Of course, they branched out, but when you go to Paddy Riley's, that's all you order is Guinness. So the Dead Rabbit downtown has a good Guinness. So it's it's no longer in search of. It is just
very good.
You want to stay in business, you better have a good Guinness.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I feel like since with the Guinness Guru, and I don't know if you've heard of.
I Guinness. Some of those guys, you just go around.
Yeah, it's a real big thing online to like go and find that best pint. So yeah, it's good to know that New York has it as well. But one last question for you, John. Before I leave you go, what for you? What does it mean to be Irish?
To me, what I'm doing now with the storytelling and just going back, twice a year and hooking up with all my friends in Dublin and all my relations up at Donegal, because my heart rate almost comes to a stop. I'm always flatlining, particularly when I get to Donegal, because when you're living in New York, it's all traffic. It's all we got to get here, get on the phone. Like I had to turn off my phone now just to do this because people call, what's up? What are you doing tonight? You're going to see here. And then when I get over there, everything just slows down. And particularly when I get into Donegal, I go up on the mountains and stuff like that, and you're just away from everything. And that there. But listen, it's whatever people's perception. Like I'll tell you, the perception of being Irish in New York is drilled into you almost from the day you go to school. Like when I went to Catholic school here in Middle Village, Queens, and we had nuns that taught us, and they were like Irish nuns. They would go around to the class. What are you Irish? What are you Italian? What are you Puerto Rican? We didn't know we knew we were Irish. We didn't know what that meant. He knew he was Italian. None of us had really been back to the country our parents were from. And some of, the Puerto Ricans were speaking Spanish, Italians were speaking that. But it's drilled into you. That's what you are. You're Irish and you're Italian. And I think the people in Ireland don't get that concept that, we grew up with that. Like we were Irish, whatever that meant. And you could take it to whatever you want it to mean. Until you get older, then you say, this is what it means. The plays, the books, the culture, the football. Like we have Gaelic Park here in the Bronx. We have huge crowds turn out for the GAA games of Americans. And that actually what they almost beat Sligo there. They beat Mayo, or I forget who they. Well, everybody beats Mayo. We'll leave that off. But yeah. But isn't that Irish that they can come back, play your own game and beat you? So I mean, but I'm so over someone saying, this and that. I said that. Well, I'm never going to convince you. So I just do it, move on. But I drilled it into my kids. They are all Irish citizens. They all have Irish passports, and they went to Galway for a semester. So
listen, John, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely to hear your stories, and thank you for sharing what Irishness means to you. And I mean, what's important about it? I think the storytelling thing is very important.
Yeah, keeping that going. And the radio show too. Like
absolutely,
a lot of the oldest songs you will never hear on RTE, like that Fenian song I sent you.
Yeah.
Which gives really, in rap almost, the history of the Republican movement in New York. So, we know what we've done. And I don't need to have someone in Dublin or in Cork say, you're not, all right, I'm not Irish. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, as long as you know, that's the main thing, right? Gurb Mila Mahagut.
Well, I like to say to the American people that they must realize, the American people must realize that they can't interfere in the internal affairs of Northern Ireland.
Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. For 150 years, you've been creating us cartoons, you depicted us as swill. And whack TV shows like the Deadpool, Benny Hill. Amazing, you never came to your senses. Figured out you'd have to face the consequences. Sent us across the water, but you didn't scope the tide. Now the tide is rising worldwide. Phineas, pump your fist if you love freedom. Phineas, pump your fist if you love culture. Phineas, pump your fist if you love freedom. Phineas, pump your fist if you love culture. From the Void to O'Neill and John O'Mahony to Joe McGarity and Michael Flannery. Sedition's our tradition and it won't just go away. Say it loud, say it proud. I will stay an unrepentant Fenian bastard. Unrepentant Fenian bastard. Unrepentant Fenian bastard. Respect to all who refuse to be mastered. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians.
Our duty is to counteract them in every way we can to make sure their misrule in Ireland will come to an end.
Pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians, pump your fist if you love freedom. Fenians, pump your fist if you love culture. Fenians.